Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to change up what I thought I was going to do. I'm going to put oh, there it is. I had a wonderful presentation ready for you, and 4 things have happened in the past 24 hours that changed my mind about what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. First was a meeting yesterday with General Corelli that just put a lot of bugs in my head and got me thinking about some things in new ways, and made me realize I'm hoping that my presentation today is more of a conversation than a speech. So if you have questions for me, I welcome them. The second was some of the things Dr. Hogue said less than half an hour ago that got me thinking about some other things I wanted to talk about. The third was the fellow who asked the question after his speech about removing the D from PTSD, and I so embrace that question because I think the spirit of it is why I'm here. But the thing that really messed with my presentation was a phone call I got at 9:30 this morning from my very dear friend, Colonel David Sutherland, who said to me, "I rocked the house. I was awesome. You better be as good as me." So there you go. Roll with the punches here as I try to wing it and honor the spirit of my good friend. It's a great honor for me to be here. Thank you for having me, and thank you very much for your interest in my work. This morning, I think Dave Sutherland spoke with you about what Admiral Mullen calls the Sea of Goodwill. And over the course of the day, I think you've had other discussions pertaining to public-private partnership and the potential for them. And I like this flow of ideas in the agenda because I think it speaks very much what I want to propose as an opener, which is this. It is my position that our collective inability so far to happily marry those two, to strategically unite popular goodwill with the consistent provision of excellent programs and services for all troops and veterans, is a burning, urgent issue of national security and public health. I think that's a bit about what our first commander-in-chief had to say when he said the words illuminated here a long time ago, and it's that very broad view that I want to cover today and hopefully get into some specifics if any of you have questions. I believe that identifying and partnering efficaciously with excellent community providers is not only a good idea, it's a strategic imperative. At this point, nearly a decade into 2 wars fought by a multiply deployed, all-volunteer force, we have no choice but to invest in a new paradigm for military wellness. One that optimizes the strengths, but also recognizes and works to mitigate the failures of a we take care of our own mentality, and embraces a new model in which community players can become accountable, trustworthy stakeholders in the care and treatment of those who've served our nation. The strength and, in fact, the very viability of an all-volunteer force, after all, is seriously undermined when the health and well-being of our members and veterans is precarious. In other words, if our warriors are not well, neither are we. Let's be clear, thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands, in fact, of our warriors are not doing so well. It's time for us to wake up, I think, be strategic, take risks, step outside of tradition, address these problems before they become crises of public health and welfare. Certainly, the new realities of post-9/11 warfare have moved our military to make tremendous advances in many ways, especially in war fighting. Advances in battlefield medicine, for example, have been staggering. That the same issues have spurred such advances, however, 9 years into this fight, that they have not inspired the same level of systemic change on the tail end of combat. Systemic change that provides for addressing the needs of warriors and veterans, warriors as they come out of combat, is very frustrating from a community development perspective, if not short-sighted and unwise. The effort I represent, the Iraq-Afghanistan Deployment Impact Fund, which for obvious reasons I'll call IADF, has, I think, demonstrated some interesting lessons about what it takes to navigate that sea of goodwill that Admiral Mullen has been talking about, and provide some useful information, I think, about both the opportunities and challenges of public-private partnership in leveraging what it is the military medical community can and must do as you face the challenges of modern warfare. But first, in order that we have a frank discussion, I think it's important that we say out loud exactly what it is that we're seeing on the civilian side, the grant-making side, the philanthropic side, that necessitates this new way of thinking. Everyone here is obviously acutely aware of the big-ticket health and wellness issues coming out of this war, but I want to share with you those of the issues that we're seeing manifest in the civilian community, because I think in order to brace and understand the potential of public-private partnership, the military must understand the impact of military wellness in an era of an all-volunteer force on the communities to which warriors return. Here are the big ones we're seeing in no particular order. Drug abuse, both illegal and legal, because let's be clear, abuse of pain meds is on the rise, is creating an entirely new class of addicts in uniform. From a grant-making perspective, as someone who understands the impact on the economic, cultural, and social welfare in communities and the repercussions of substance abuse, not only on individuals, but on families and communities as well, I am deeply concerned about what may well be an egregious impact of service member drug use on the broader population, in the form of need for services, obviously, but also in terms of criminality, incarceration, impact on families for generations to come. 2, the impact of multiple deployments. This is a big one, obviously, yet somehow among the least examined concerns in the context of health. And it's the white elephant in the room, I think, because a growing body of evidence, at least as demonstrated anecdotally by my grantees, and there are 53 nonprofit organizations around the country that we funded, suggests that not only the physical and mental health, but the combined emotional and financial tolls of prolonged absence from one's family is quietly but surely starting to devastate much of the military community. The unemployment, home foreclosure, divorce, child abuse, family violence rates of troops and veterans and military families have skyrocketed past those of their civilian counterparts. From a community wellness perspective, these are health concerns. 3, the changing role of women, with DoD's figures alone suggesting that at least 50% of military sexual trauma going unreported. The medical, mental health, and family-related consequence of this change in warfighting is a conference all on its own, if not a clarion call to a new need for ways of healing. And of course, the big one, the unholy trinity of mental health, PTS, TBI, and depression. The Invisible Wounds report that ran release in 2008 told us that at least 20%, 450,000 at this point, conservatively, are coming home with at least one, if not all 3 of those. And that at least 50% of them are not receiving adequate evidence-based care, according to baseline standards from either the military or the VA. Thousands are falling through the cracks on a daily basis. I'm certain of this. I know it firsthand. I see it every day in my work. And it's my grantees, it's nonprofit organizations, it's churches, it's neighbors that are meeting the attendant needs where our federal agencies are not. Because TBI is so prevalent, but we yet have so much to understand about it, I think these are trends that are likely to continue, if not notably increase, because we don't yet know the true impact of TBI. Alzheimer's, blindness, deafness. Who's going to be dealing with that 40 years from now when those implications show their head? Communities, community healthcare providers. And by the families, by the families whose loved ones are living with those conditions. I think we think Agent Orange was bad. I suspect it ain't got nothing on TBI, and I think we have to plan now for those impacts in the long haul by partnering with community-based and private agencies that can conduct meaningful research and help you provide meaningful care. These are the few of the big ones that we're seeing at the community level at this point. Why they matter in the context of public-private partnerships in health more generally is because providing patient-centered, family-inclusive, evidence-based mental health programs and related services in tandem with excellent physical health is not just a good idea, it's a mandate. And the good news is that the issues I've named here are the ones where engagement with qualified private sector providers and resources could dramatically leverage the military's capacity to mitigate the damage and deliver wellness now, immediately. Again, this is another thing I see happening on a daily basis already. It's one thing to remove a guy's shrapnel, it's another to remove the scars from his soul, to involve his family, to get him into counseling, and if needed, to dignify his service by making sure he becomes the next leader, not the next statistic. But we know that government agencies can't really provide that personal touch that's needed to realize this vision all the time. Community players can. And we don't have to invent the wheel here. USU-HJF has demonstrated already that it can be done. Many of you have seen some of the really big examples of things we funded. Center for the Intrepid at BAMC, NICO are two of the big examples. And some of you have come to know some of the other programs and services that leverage the impact of what they do in those places. Effective, efficient, public-private partnership can be done. It has been done successfully. Unfortunately, the current model is totally and completely unsustainable. Here's the thing. Warrior care is the purview of DoD. Veteran care is the purview of the VA. But at the end of the day, warriors don't come home to federal agencies. They come home to families and communities. And it is there in communities that the untreated wounds of war fester and present the very poverty, drug addiction, mental health impacts, homelessness, family violence, and incarceration that require such unbelievable force on the part of my grantees and the thousands of other nonprofits that have sprung up since 9/11 alone. It is also there at the community level that the pool of people impacted by war, that our future volunteer service members must be recruited and drawn. In this way, then, our lack of partnership represents very serious repercussions for national security. But it is also there in neighborhoods and families from which our warriors come and to which they will eventually return, that the personal, individualized touch that makes the difference between a guy slipping through the cracks and not can be provided. I assert to you that you'd think the military would have recognized this by now and invested. And yet today, most of the movement in the realm of hands reaching across sectors to form partnerships has been initiated on the civilian side. To some extent, but not enough, by funders, to a very large extent from the nonprofit sector, and to a very large extent from military families and spouses in the communities in which they live. Most of the dollars, most of the innovation have come from these sources, whose energy, resources, strategic understanding of systems change to take risks has helped spur major advances in warrior wellness, whether or not they're known more broadly to the military community. What I'm hoping is that, if nothing else, today you walk away committed as representatives of the military to the idea that the military has to step forward towards civilian society, just as we have to step forward to help you meet your charge. This is what we tell warriors. It's okay to ask for help, right? This is a joint effort. This is not just about the goodwill of ordinary citizens showing their support for the troops through donations and volunteerism. From my perspective, this discussion is much more about a reciprocal relationship, a new American security that says we all need each other, military and civilian alike, to remain safe and healthy in this new world order. What I've learned over the course of distributing $250 million in grants to spur the very sorts of partnership we're talking about today is that these decisions have to be strategic. So I'd like to share with you quickly as I can a bit about the USU-HJF story, what we do and what we've learned, and time permitting, close with discussions and maybe some healthy argument. So the question I most often get asked, how did this happen? In 2006, a wealthy individual who had been quite a philanthropist, although an anonymous one, for 30 years, was watching 60 Minutes. He doesn't remember the episode, he doesn't remember what they covered, but he knows he turned off the TV, looked at his wife, and said, "We have to help these guys." At the time, it was $105 million. I got a call from the California Community Foundation where he'd put his money anonymously, and they said, "We have a donor who wants to impact the needs of troops and service members." I initially turned it down because I didn't know anything about their needs. The problem was neither did any other grant maker. There was no history, no standard, no set of best practices in the field of organized philanthropy for addressing the needs of warriors and veterans. There was no intellectual capital whatsoever. So we had to do a lot of research, and we had to apply the best practices in our field to make what we thought at the time, and we still think, were good grant-making decisions. Here's what we learned. 1, the impact of war upon those who serve are many and complex, affecting individuals and families and communities in very, very different ways. But of the over 2 million folks who have deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan so far, the vast majority are facing new needs. 2, if this nation doesn't efficaciously address the deployment-related needs of our service members and veterans now, their individual concerns will become our crises of public health and social welfare. For these reasons alone, I think it merits the attention and leadership from the philanthropic community. That partnership with the military and its civilian cohort agencies is an important public health strategy worthy of their investment. Here's what we learned when we looked a little deeper. Tremendous advances have been made in military medicine. We've talked about some of that. And again, much of the innovation in the commensurate attendant services coming from the nonprofit sector. 2, thousands upon thousands of military-related nonprofits have sprung up in response to OEF and OIF. About 95% of those operate without the cooperation or even the acknowledgement of the Departments of Defense and Veteran Affairs. Some of those nonprofits are doing nice things like shipping popcorn and magazines to the troops. Most of them are making people whole again and saving lives. One of the greatest values nonprofit organizations bring to military and veteran services is trust. Dr. Hoag talked about this just a little while ago. Rand's Invisible Wounds study documented clearly that the number one reason a troop does not seek help for mental health issues is fear of medication. They fear they will be improperly medicated. Number 2, they fear that if the wrong folks find out, there goes their career. These two reasons precede stigma, which is the third. Community providers can provide a shelter from the virus that is fear and stigma in the military. There are excellent, accountable, well-run nonprofit organizations in every state of this nation addressing every possible deployment-related concern you can imagine. Among those whose programs and services pertain to some of the issues medical professionals might want to know about are adaptive housing, transportation for the disabled, emergency family support from counseling to child care, financial aid, substance abuse treatment, transitional treatment, and even world-class care in the realm of traumatic brain injury and reconstructive surgery, as you know. Finally, the vast majority of these organizations receive little to no organized funding. What I mean by that, grant makers here know what I mean. Most support to these nonprofits comes from individuals. A check that they write at their church, a button they click on their computer. But very few foundations and corporate giving programs have yet stepped up to the table to provide a leadership role in supporting military support organizations. So I blame my colleagues in philanthropy for this. For these reasons alone, I think it merits attention from the military community. That thoughtful partnership with well-vetted nonprofit community organizations swiftly and efficaciously is a smart, necessary move right now. Over the past 4 years, we've distributed a whole lot of money, but the value of the work, I think, goes well beyond the realm of the financial. It has, we think, changed the landscape for military-related philanthropy, and we've documented those challenges and successes. We've identified and published a set of standards and best practices pertaining to the relationship between the military and private sector partner, and I encourage everyone here to review those. They're on our website, which has the longest URL in Internet history. So if you just Google IADIF, I-A-D-I-F, and from there click on download the full report, I think something like that, you will find a nice, beautiful, thick report of ours, and in there is the vetting criteria that we've published, very carefully considered. The considerations you can make as you think about partnering with nonprofits. What kind of excellence, what kind of standards are you looking for to know that they will dignify military culture and your work and the best interests of your patients? Perhaps, however, the greatest outcome of our work has been, by funding a huge, sometimes controversial cohort of organizations, is to have demonstrated the breadth, efficacy, and range of what public-private partnership can look like. Here's how we did it. Number 1, money. I can't pretend that this wouldn't have happened without it. 2, vision. We did hard work, we conducted due diligence, and we came up with a strategic framework by which to distribute our money and make a difference. 3, a willingness to take risks. 4, using best practices in philanthropy. Every grant we've made is transparent, and we can be held to the mat on every one of them and share with you our vetting process and why we made the decisions we did. Transparent, accountable, accessible philanthropy needs to be the type of grant making that facilitates public-private partnerships for the military, where the military can't or won't pay. I want to, forgive me, I'm not so technologically savvy here. I want to talk with you about some of the things we funded so you can get a sense of the types of public-private partnerships that are at your fingertips. Let's see if this works. Okay. Forgive me the homemade slides. Not my strength. These are pictures that come from some of our grantees. Our first phase, the first $105 million that the donor gave us, had a mandate from the donor, which was direct services. He and his wife really wanted us to touch lives right now, take care of deployment-related need. You see a mobile clinic provided by disabled American vets. Up here in the corner, you see a picture from the Coming Home Project, which got a lot of laughs in the beginning, and now the waiting list is 2 years long, for breathing and meditation workshops for folks who are having a hard time coming home. Operation Purple Camps from National Military Families Association. We engaged in a very large number of direct service grants that met on-the-ground immediate needs for families facing deployment-related need. Project Victory at the TIER Foundation in Texas provides traumatic brain injury help primarily to veterans who've separated already and never sought or got the care they needed while in active duty. Here's an unusual one up in the corner. The Farmer Veteran Coalition, helping veterans start organic farms. Why is that so important? Think about how many enlisted folks come from rural communities. We're in a recession. There are no jobs, but you have farming skills. You know how to start a farm. Here's a green job and a way to train you to start your own business. They've got a number of veterans already who have developed multi-million-dollar blueberry farms in Florida, folks who would have been otherwise unemployable. One of my favorites, one of everyone's favorites, Sesame Workshop. Talk, Listen, Connect, helping military children understand and weather the impact of deployment. The latest project they've conducted that we funded is what happens when you lose a parent. Elmo's a pretty good teacher, it turns out, a pretty good therapist. I really liked this grant because it spoke to one of my values, one of my favorite things, which is that we have to engage Iraq and Afghanistan veterans in becoming the change that we want to see. This is Derek McGinnis, wounded obviously. We gave a grant to the American Pain Foundation to have Derek write a book to help troops and vets with amputations deal with pain. That book wouldn't have been published, I suppose, without our grant support. Phase 2 of our grant program looked not only at direct services, but systemic change. We funded the RAND study. I know that's controversial. It's one we stand behind. We funded a public service campaign that landed Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, another controversial organization, but they've done a great job with the We've Got Your Back campaign. 150,000 vets have already signed up in a secure online community where today's young people communicate and support each other. We have funded non-lobbying advocacy and congressional testimony. All kinds of things we funded to raise public awareness. Again, we weren't afraid of controversy. We think putting this discussion in the realm of the public is better than doing nothing at all. And of course, we funded some very major capital campaigns. Oh, I wanted to show you this quickly. I don't know if you can see it. This was part of a public awareness campaign we did with the Ad Council. These posters were hung all over America, not prominently enough, but this one says 99% of Americans have seen combat on TV. 1% of Americans have seen combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. Trying to raise public awareness that way. I'm going to skip past this one in the interest of time. So 2 of the really big prominent ones we funded and about which I get a lot of questions are, of course, Center for the Intrepid at Brooke Army Medical Center. What a fantastic facility. Through private funding and the idea of folks at the Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund, this building was built in 18 months where the Army had projected 10 to 15 years just to proffer the land. This is the kind of public-private partnership I'm talking about. Things happen fast in the private sector, and that's a great reason alone to engage in these partnerships. For those who haven't been there, these are a couple of the inside machines that we funded at Center for the Intrepid. I love the Surf Rider, which helps folks regain their balance, and the can't remember the name of this room here, where you also work on balance in a variety of terrains that are simulated under your feet. Karen system, the Karen system, thank you. NICO, there's Mr. Arnold Fisher himself speaking at the NICO opening ceremony. He knows I like to call him the pit bull who makes things happen. He raises the money and ruffles a lot of feathers, and what happens is that buildings get built. And because of this one, God willing, we're gonna figure out this TBI thing. This is one that a lot of folks don't know about, but it's another example of what we call a capital campaign, paying for building where public-private partnership changes lives. This is a family transition center outside Brooke Army Medical Center. For the first time in all these years, military families that come to be with their loved ones at BAMC now have a place to hang out together and get some support. And most importantly, the patients get to get out of their rooms and have a fun place to go and hang out. I show this slide only to show you the next picture. So you see that liquid on the ground. That's how hot this vehicle was. That's steel. That's the metal from the Humvee melting. And that right there is Octavio Sanchez. I hope everyone here knows about Operation Mend at UCLA. The extraordinary, brilliant doctors there helped Octavio come out of BAMC from picture number 1, and he now looks like picture number 2, and he's a fantastic guy and a good friend. And his face looks beautiful because of the military's partnership with UCLA, also funded by us. Our final investments in grant making, I talked about direct services, systemic change. Our third phase was to re-grant money to those organizations who did a great job for us and for the country, more importantly. Chief among those, and I really want to impress that point, we invested $45 million in community foundations in the states hit hardest by deployment. It's so important, I think, that everyone here knows what a community foundation is. A community foundation, there are 717 of them across the nation. These are philanthropic organizations where you can call and say, I just won the lottery. I have an extra $1 million, but I really don't know how to vet nonprofits. I don't know what to do with my money. Can you invest it in the community for me? That's what a community foundation does. They have on the ground, boots on the ground, capital, intellectual capital about how communities work and what's efficacious in the nonprofit sector. And we gave them money to redistribute in their communities. And thus was born the Triad Fund in Texas and the Brave Fund in Florida, which are now going on to raise millions of dollars more. How am I doing time-wise? I can't read this. I'm close. Wrap it up. Let me cut straight to the recommendations. The caveat here, of course, is that in order for doctors to engage in partnerships with the nonprofit sector, you need clearance, funding, and leadership from the military. They have to open those doors for you. You can't walk through them without approval to do so. So let me first make my recommendations to military leadership so doctors can do their best jobs in partnering with the community. Number 1, invest in seamless transition. Care needs to start while troops are active and should never end. If we as a nation are to mitigate the problems service members face when they come home and become veterans, we will have to tackle the issues while troops are still on active duty before the issues become egregious. Inherent in this recommendation is the assertion that our military must act on the responsibility to intervene proactively after subjecting our troops to multiple deployments. 2, DoD, and these are related, DoD and VA must work together. It's got to happen. To establish a comprehensive national homecoming plan with a very strong medical component and a comprehensive social work approach that recognizes mental health issues in the broader context of people's lives. DoD should commit to the same comprehensive approach as they do when preparing troops for combat to when warriors leave the military, a D-boot camp, to ensure that veterans are as healthy, well, and ready for the job market and community life as they were for the battlefield. This is a smart strategy, both in terms of public health and national security. These are my recommendations. Let me finish up with military. I'm sorry. The military has to empower its medical providers to engage in public-private partnerships, and part of the way they can do that for you is vetting them for you. You need not become nonprofit experts. When you're a surgeon, you're a surgeon. You're a doctor, you're a doctor. You don't need to understand the nonprofit sector. You do need clearance to work with well-vetted partners. One of the ways you and the military leaders can do that is use the resources that are available. Colonel Sutherland, when he called me this morning, asked me to mention something that he wanted to and forgot to. Warrior Gateway. Warrior Gateway is an online resource that over time intends to identify, vet, and rate every single nonprofit service provider in this entire nation that is providing services to troops, veterans, and military families. You can also go online to coalitionforveterans.org and look at CIAV, Coalition for Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans. All of those organizations have been vetted by funders and are excellent. You can look at the National Resource Directory. This isn't rocket science. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. There are online resources that help you identify partners that leverage what you can do for the good of your patients. For doctors, I say, commit to understanding the continuum of needs that your patients face and connect with quality community resources that can help get your patients from point A to point B where the military cannot provide. Have patience with the nonprofit providers with which you'll partner. This is a new type of relationship we're talking about, and both civilian and military need to learn about and respect each other. Know your community foundations. Where all else fails, I know people in uniform are not allowed to solicit or endorse, but it's okay for you to introduce yourself to the community foundations in the places where you work and just let them know that you're there. Their donors may come your way without you even asking. I'm trying to cut to the chase here because of time. Secretary Gates has spoken aloud and often about reducing the DoD budget, and few among us, I think, would disagree that spending has gotten out of control. But I'd be all for keeping it right where it is if we could turn those dollars around and reallocate them to do things like understand and completely conquer the nature and trajectory of TBI, or to provide women-centered care at every military medical center in the nation, and case manage every single warrior, whether his wounds are visible or not. Maybe that's what it would take to tackle this horrid epidemic of suicide that hangs over this conference and our collective communities like a cloud. Public-private partnership works because private partners can do things faster and more efficiently than bureaucracies can. They will only be sustainable, however, and continue to incur the goodwill of the American people if military agencies invest. We cannot turn to organized philanthropy to fund all of these relationships. The wealth doesn't exist, and arguably the government that made a war is also responsible for managing its impact. The military must invest dollars in these relationships. We on the grant-making side will be happy to meet you halfway. What is needed most of all is a coordinated response to these issues that relies on the strategic deployment of our respective core competencies to design, implement, evaluate, and sustain a new paradigm for warrior care. Shared responsibility, shared burden, mutual respect, and investment by the military. I'm going to stop there because my time is up, and encourage you to take a look at our report online. There's our URL if you're interested in the report. I can't thank you enough for your hard work and for your interest in ours. Thank you so much.